Here we go. Perek Chav Beis Pasuk Chav Dalet. Mishpatim 22-24. Page 430. So yesterday we were speaking about witchcraft, and yes, Torah anytime, people. This is a Cubs scarf, in case you're wondering. Yes, it is a warm scarf which I was sent by a very fine Talmud of mine, and keeps me warm here in the Yerushalayim cold winter. And White Sox fans, this is for you. So, White Sox fans, you're not even allowed to be watching this year, you know. Get out of here. I believe so, which just ratifies my approach. So we spoke yesterday about witchcraft and the various forms. We asked the question, we ended off with certain talent, and people will tell you this all the time in life. You're going to use it. You're meant to use it. So a person, let's say, you have the Einstein wrote his tshuva where it was usher for Cohen to become a doctor, and Cohen's got the ability to become a face is a woman who's got a magnificent voice, a woman who's got a fabulous voice. And what she wants to do with the fabulous voice, she wants to sing and perform in front of audiences, and when you come from, and a man's not allowed to hear you singing, so about your only outlet is going to be either singing in at an old age home for women. In which case your voice doesn't really matter that much. The quality, or you could perform with some of these groups. They put together from women put together plays where they perform for other from women. I mean, honestly, this is not going to be a Broadway hit. It's not, and it could be a very big disappointment. For a man, there are also certain careers that you're let's say guy's a magnificent chef. And you want to be at a high-end restaurant where you're serving tray food and you're not allowed to do it. And about your only outlet is going to be cooking in a yeshiva. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. They have to suppress the ability. I have a friend who was a broadcaster. I think I mentioned him in the past. He was a broadcaster for what's it called? The English news. Kol Yisrael's English news. This was the guy who was a Baal Tshuva. He had a background in communications. And he walked in, also it's Chassidish with a stripe, the whole Chassidish get up. And he walked in cold to Kol Yisrael. And he asked for a tryout. And they gave him a tryout. He was far better than anything that they had. And they made him, he was their anchor man on the main news broadcasts. He was the guy who broadcast the news. All Americans in Israel, there was this period where we used to always listen to the radio, Kol Yisrael news. You got to hear the news. That's one of the differences between Israel and America. Israel living in America and Israel, you hear that beep. I don't know if you ever heard a beep on the radio. Beep, beep, beep. It's like on the hour there's the news. In Israel, people are always listening to the news. Because it's a country where every hour the news changes. From 1 hour to the next, there could be an attack from Syria, chas v'shalom, or the government could collapse at any minute. In America, whoever listened to the news, you watch the news once a day, and none of it was significant. As long as they were picking up the garbage, there wasn't a garbage strike, we were fine. Who cared? Elections every 4 years, and you don't count. Your vote doesn't count. So this guy walked in. In Israel. It's like, hey, I count. I'm a somebody over here. And in so this guy walked in cold. And I once asked him what he does about lashon hara on the air. Because Israeli politics, when you're reporting political news in Israel, it's not generally not complimentary. And other issues that come up. What do you do about this? So he told me at the time he had asked Rav Scheinberg Zatzal for a psak if he's allowed to take the job. Rav Scheinberg told him the news is going to be read off anyway. And the guy who reads off the news, he's not the news editor. The news editor is the guy who decides what goes on there. But he does have a certain amount of input into softening it. And Rav Scheinberg said that it's going to be read anyway, and therefore he told him it's permissible. But it could very well be that's forbidden. And you might become a guy who wants to be a gossip columnist for a magazine or a newspaper, and it could be you can't do that. That's a test. In life, that's often a test where a person may have to suppress their ability, and therefore over here, the Torah is also telling you that over here, you have to suppress your ability. Okay. Now, take a look at the bottom of the page, Chav Daled. So it says like this, Im kesef talve es ami, if you lend my people money. And Rashi says right over here that the word im over here is, normally im means if. And in this context, im doesn't mean if as much as when, because you have an obligation to lend money. So he says, im talve kesef es ami, es ha'ani imach, the poor man with you, lo siya lo kenoshe, don't be a tough creditor, don't press him for the money. And lo sesiman olav neshech, you are not allowed to put interest on him. Now, you have a couple of ideas over here. Idea number one is the question of when you lend money. Lending money is a tremendous mitzvah because it's the most dignified way for a poor person to give him tzedakah. Is sometimes the most dignified thing is to lend him money and help him stay on his feet. Let's say a guy's got a business and his business is hurting. If $10,000 that you lend him could keep his business afloat, again, and get through the difficult time, and then he won't need to take tzedakah. So it's a very, very high form of, it's one of the biggest cheseds that you can do is to lend somebody money. Having said that, you have to lend money, but you don't have to lend money in an irresponsible way. Now, you don't have to lend money just to anybody who asks you. You have to be able to see that the guy has the potential to pay you back. That, yes. And if a person needs their own money, you can't just lend lots of money to anybody who asks you, because then there'll be a run on your finances. You won't have anything left for yourself. But if it's a situation where you can lend the guy money, and you know the guy's going to pay back, people don't like parting with their money, that you have to do. That's a very, very big mitzvah, to lend people money. So the commentaries over here talk about that. It says, if you lend money to my people, to the poor man, imach, with you. What does that word imach mean? What does that word, a poor man with you? What does it mean, imach? So there are different opinions here. One opinion is that when a poor man comes to you, whether it's for a loan, whether it's for tzedakah, we have a tendency to deal. Sometimes you deal with the poor people like, yeah, he's kind of nudnik, and he's bothering you. You want to get rid of him as fast as possible. Imach means bring him into your house, make him comfortable, treat him with dignity. Imach, bring him in. Don't just, okay, you just wait at the door. I'll get it for you. Right? And again, there's a lot of judgment that's needed here because sometimes you get knocks on the door. In any frum community in the world, you have people knocking at your door on a regular basis, right, coming around collecting for various causes. And so you have to ration your time. You can't just invite everybody in for a whole evening. You'll never have time for yourself. But in general, if a person is down and out, you should treat him, the Torah is emphasizing to treat him with dignity and respect, number one. Number two is that imach means nobody else should know about it. Tzedakah should be given, and loans should be given with a tremendous amount of, you have to be very discreet about it. You don't, what do you call it? You don't, you maintain the dignity of the poor man. And there's a story, a guy once went to in England, I think a story happened in England. These guys collect for their Shabbos distribution. Every community has a Tomchei Shabbos, a Shabbos distribution fund, to help people make Shabbos. So this guy knocks on the door of a very wealthy man. This guy's collecting for tzedakah, and he says, could you help us out? We have this Shabbos fund. We help out about 300 families a week. Can you help us out? So the guy says to him, look, I'll give you £1,000, but I only have one condition. £1,000 is a nice donation. I'd like to know who this money is going to go to help. So the guy says to him, to tell you the truth, we have a policy. We don't disclose who we're giving the money to. Yeah, we don't. So the guy says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you £2,500. I think that's a pretty significant donation. I'm just on condition, but I do like to know where my money's going. He says, I'm sorry, we don't do this. So okay, I'll take you get £10,000. I'll match your weekly outlay. I'll give you £10,000, but I think for £10,000, I'm entitled to know who the money's going to. So the guy says to him, look, you can give us £1,000,000. I will never tell you who the money is going to. We protect the dignity of those who are on our list. There is no way that I'm going to tell you. So the guy says, thank you very much. That's what I wanted to know. You see, I've lost my money. I took a major hit in the market. I was actually going to approach you because I myself need help. But I was afraid that, I'd be embarrassed that people would find out. But I see how discreet you are. So now could you put me on the list? Right? So that is part of the imach means. Imach means that you have to try to protect and maintain the dignity of the people that you're helping, number two. Number three is that you should figure out a way that one of the best ways to help a poor person is to put yourself in his position. You happen to get lucky, you got the money, but im kesef talve es ani imach. Imach means he's with you. Try to think what it's like to be a poor man. Try to think what it's like to be, and that's an attitude in general, giving tzedakah, the attitude, I'd rather be the one who's giving than the one who has to ask for it. Right? I'd rather be the one who could give than the one who needs to ask. And therefore, the trick is to always put yourself into the shoes of the guy who needs the money. There's a famous Hasidic story, famous Hasidic Maisa. The guy comes to, the Rebbe comes to knock on the door to ask for help for somebody, for some poor widow. The Rebbe needs to come to say, he approaches the house of the poor man, of the rich man, and it's a freezing, frigid winter day. And he approaches the house of this rich man, and as the rich man looks out the window, he sees the Rebbe is coming. So the guy, he opens up his front door and he goes running out in his shirt sleeves to greet the Rebbe. Rebbe, please, I shalom. He says, shalom aleichem. He gives a very warm shalom aleichem. He says, he says, how are you? He says, yeah, good. He says, yeah, I'm collecting. There's a lady, they can't even afford wood for the fire to warm their house in winter. He says, okay. He says, yeah. He says, I would like, yes, sir, Rebbe, I'll give you, please come in. So finally they go into the house. It's nice and warm and toasty in the house. And the guy, puts together a big pile of money for this guy. And he finally says, Rebbe, can I just ask you a question? Yeah, why did you talk to me outside for so long? Why did we go straight inside? So Rebbe says, you know why I did that? Because if I would come into your warm, toasty house, and I tell you that they don't have wood for the fire, so, you'd give me a couple of rubles. So I wanted you to feel a little bit, what's it like to be freezing and frigid, the winter outside over here, but it's like, now I could ask you for the money for this widow who can't afford firewood, and you're going to be a little softer about it because you know what it's like to be without. So the Torah is telling you, put yourself in the other guy's position. The person always has to put himself in the other guy's position. Feel, boy, am I glad I don't have to be that guy, right? And it's a difficult thing, but that's what the Torah is talking about lending. Number 3. Number 4 is the question of the one of the commentaries takes this completely out of context. What's it called? Anybody know what's it called when a funeral when a Jew dies? What do they do for him? What's it called when they bury him? A levaya. Levaya means to escort him. To escort him to the final place where you escort him to. That's called a levaya. So one of the commentaries takes the pasuk completely out of context, and he says like this: Im kesef talve es ami. If there's money that escorts, the word talve, which means to loan, also can be understood as coming from the root of to escort. And the old saying is that, you don't take any of it with you. A guy can make a lot of money. You want to hear a real nasty one? Oh, this will make your day. Somebody once said, you could have a man who spends his entire life working and accumulating money, only to then die and leave it to no one? Nobody leaves it to no one. Somebody will always find the money, right? What's that? The dog? You're getting close. Sometimes people say, yeah, I'll leave it to his children. He works a whole life to leave the money to his children. No, that's nishka ferelach. People don't mind doing that. You could work an entire lifetime accumulating money and then leaving it to your wife's next husband. Oh. Yeah, that's nasty. Yeah, that's nasty, right? And you can leave it there. Not only, now you said the dog, right? Because sometimes we mentioned that a person could be brought back as a dog. And let's say this guy dies and he comes back as a dog. And then he's sitting at the table where his wife and her new husband are sitting at the table having a meal, and he's the dog in the house now. It get really bad, right? And by the way, when you come back as an animal, none of us obviously, those people who do, when you come back as an animal, you know that you were around in a previous incarnation as a human being. And you'd like to talk. And all that comes out is a bark. How would you like? How's that for nasty? Now, guys, just take it easy. Next time you see a dog, I told you, don't like kind of look like when nobody's watching. Like, what'd you do? Yeah, what'd you do? Don't talk to the dog. Right? We're only talking about. Yeah. Oh, that's what you did. No, don't. What do you call? We're only talking about what the concept is. There you go. What's her name? You remember the guy who ran for president? The guy with the big hair on top. What was his name? Kerry? What was it? John Kerry? Mm-hmm. Right? Remember John Kerry? What's that? You're not talking about Donald Trump. No. The guy, John Kerry. Remember John Kerry? He was Secretary of State for Obama. Okay, John Kerry. So John Kerry married Mrs. Henrietta Heinz. You ever heard of Heinz Ketchup? Yeah. So Heinz Ketchup, Mr. Heinz, whatever his first name was, whatever his name was, Johann or Siegfried or whatever his name was. So his wife, he died, and he was rich. Yeah, Heinz Ketchup does okay. And Heinz Ketchup, Mr. Heinz's wife, then they married John Kerry. Now, if you were Mr. Heinz, and you knew that you're going to die and leave your money to some unsuccessful presidential candidate that your wife's going to spend, and Mr. Heinz would probably have eaten mustard if he knew that's what his ketchup money would be going to. So the Torah is telling you, your money doesn't go with you. There's only one source of money that does go with you. Im kesef talve es ami. If you want money to escort your nation, you want your money to escort you, ese ani imach. It's only the money that you give to the poor man that goes with you. The tzedakah that you give to a poor man, that credit goes with you into the world. There was once a rich man who was giving away a lot of tzedakah money, and his family member said to him, "Why are you giving away so much money?" He said, "I'm just trying to smuggle some money into the world to come." And that's the only way it goes with you. Otherwise, you leave it all behind. So the tzedakah money that you give and the chesed that you do with your money, that goes with you into the world to come. That goes with us into the world to come. Everything else is left behind. Everything else is left behind. Now, here the Torah says that you're not allowed to, what do you call it? You're not allowed to take interest from him. And interest is a very interesting subject. No pun intended. Interest is a very fascinating subject because the Torah says you're not allowed to take interest. And somebody who lends with interest does not arise at the resurrection of the dead. It's considered a very, very severe avera. To take interest is a very severe avera. Why don't you arise? What's it got to do with the resurrection? The guy lends with interest. What's right? How did he get to Tchias? He doesn't get up at Tchias HaMesim. How do you?
Everyone?
What that?
Is that to everyone or just like Jewish people?
Oh, good question. We'll get there. Guy lends with interest to Jewish people. Does not arise at the resurrection. The halacha is you're allowed to lend to a non-Jew with interest, and we have to understand why that is also. So first of all, the idea is like this. The Gemara says there are 4 people who are considered as if they're dead. 4 people are considered as if they're dead. A blind person, a childless person, somebody who has tsaras, leprosy, and a poor man. It's considered as if they're dead. Remember it says by Dustin and Aviram, Moshe Rabbeinu, God says, Moshe Rabbeinu, you could go back to Egypt because the people who wanted your life, who are hunting you down have died. And Rashi says, they died. I mean, Dustin and Aviram are still alive. So Gemara says, yeah, they lost their money. And a poor man's considered like he's dead. That means Dustin and Aviram no longer have political influence because they've lost their money. So a poor man is considered tantamount to death. A guy comes to you and he borrows money, and you charge him interest. So what you've done is you haven't really brought him back to life. You haven't given him life. He's a poor man. He's tantamount to dead. He's as if he's dead. You haven't given him life. Therefore, mida keneged mida, this person does not arise at Tchias HaMesim. You didn't give him life. This person will not be given life either. That's what the Gemara says. That's the explanation. So, there's a famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eger. There's a man living in the town who was a very wealthy man. And he was, number one, he was very stingy. He didn't support poor people, number one. And number two, he lent with interest. Then this guy died. And the Chevra Kadisha, the members of the burial society, they came to the children. They said to them, listen, your father was a tightwad, and he lent with interest. Normally a burial costs 250 rubles. We're charging you 5,000 rubles. They said, that's ridiculous. You charge us 20 times as much. Father, he said, we're not paying. That's ridiculous. That's price gouging. They said, either you pay the money, it's time for some payback. Either you give the money, or we leave your father's body to rot in the sun. So he said, this is ridiculous. We want to go to Din Torah. So they went to Rabbi Akiva Eger for a psak. So Rabbi Akiva Eger said, let me explain something to you, gentlemen. I'll explain to you what's going on. You see, normally, a burial plot costs 250 rubles. Because essentially it's a rental. Because one day there's going to be a resurrection of the dead, and those who have died are going to arise. But your father lent with interest. He's not going anywhere. He's got to buy the place outright. That costs 5,000 rubles. That's what Rabbi Akiva Eger said. Okay? You lend with interest is very severe. So Yona's asking a good question. Yona's asking, does it apply to others? And number one. And number two, if you stop and think about what's wrong with interest. The whole world lives on interest. Every bank in the world lives on interest. Every loan, anybody you get a loan from takes interest. And not only that, it's logical. It's logical. If you got my lawnmower, if you want to use my lawnmower, it's something called renting a lawnmower or renting a car. You rent it. You pay money for use and then you give it back. All you want to do here is rent my money. I'll give you $10,000, and when you expect you to pay me back $11,000. Number one. Number two, what's happening over here? What would happen if the money stayed by me? If I kept my money by me, what would I do? I'd make money with it. So what am I doing? I'm giving you my money to make money with my money. So it's only fair that I should make money too. Logically, and the whole world works that way. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? And let's make the question even stronger. Even if you agree to pay me interest, you're not allowed to. That means I want to borrow $10,000. I'll be happy to pay you 10% interest. I'll be happy to pay you 10% interest. And the halacha is you can't. And if you do, you're transgressing also. It's not only the lender, it's the borrower. The borrower is transgressing also. Why? Why is that? So there are two explanations here. Explanation number one is that there's a difference between how you deal with family and how you deal with acquaintances. There's a difference. If your brother came to you to ask you for a loan, would you charge your brother interest? Most people in the world wouldn't. There are people who do. They love their money more than their brother. But there are people who, they wouldn't. Would you charge your mother interest? I had a guy here once in Yeshiva, he said to me, I did. He said to me, he lent his mother money and charged her interest. You know what I wanted to do? I just wanted to take him back in the barn and give him a whipping. That's all. That's all I wanted to do was take him to the back of the barn, take a stick or a whip, and apply Malchus. That's what the guy does. Nothing else. Nothing else. That's how you deal with your mother. Maybe she should have charged you for getting up in the middle of the night and changing your diaper when you were a baby. How about that? Can you imagine? Okay, would you charge your dad and charge your brother interest? In other words, when it comes to family, there are certain things that are expected. Hey, my brother's down and out. I'll lend him some money. I don't charge my brother interest. Klal Yisrael is a family. Klal Yisrael is a family. A non-Jew, you're a nice guy, I'll lend you money. And I expect that, and not only that, you expect to pay me interest. And therefore, the standard that we apply to other people, we don't apply to our family. Klal Yisrael is a family. Somebody born into Klal Yisrael, somebody converted into Klal Yisrael, you are now a member of a family. With family members, we're expected to behave differently. And therefore, you're not going to lend your family member interest, number one. Number two, there's a bitachon issue here. And the bitachon issue is that when you lend money, if you become a money lender, it's not good for the lender. In other words, according to that approach, you have to be a little softer on the borrower. You have to be softer on the borrower. Because the borrower is your brother. He's your family member. You're lending, don't be such a not nice person. What it takes an inconsiderate person to lend your family with interest. The second approach says there's a bitachon issue here. Part of having to earn a parnasa is that earning a parnasa means you have to be dependent on a Kodesh Baruch Hu. You have to go to work, you have to invest money, open up a business especially when you're running a business. There are a lot of people who have opened up business. What's the percentage of businesses that close? The people who try new businesses every year, the percentage of businesses, there's such a high percentage of businesses that they try it and the business collapses, it never makes it. And by the way, the business is like they a guy came to a Rav. Somebody was running a supermarket, and he sold the supermarket, and the other guy ran the supermarket, and the supermarket collapsed. The Rav said to him, "The supermarket, it's not the supermarket that makes the money. You lose the money. It's the person who makes the money lose the money. You buy a lottery ticket, you might not win. If I take that lottery ticket from you, I'll probably win. I might win. I'll try to win. I'll be good. That means it's not the person. It's not the ticket that wins. It's the person that wins. Were you zocher or not? In business, you need siyata d'shmaya. When it comes to lending with interest, what do you need? All you need is to hire a couple of big thugs to break the knees of the people who aren't paying you back on time. And then you sit in your office and you open up envelopes stuffed with cash. It's a very good business. You make a lot of money. And what happens is when you're in a cushy business making a lot of money, the connection between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes somewhat tenuous. You forget that you're dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's so secure, you forget that you're dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, you, the lender, can't pay me interest even if you want to. Because you're doing something harmful to me. By being willing to pay me with interest, you are affecting my relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore, it's usher. Where does it become permissible? By non-Jews. All through history, there was never a problem. Jews were money lenders. In Christian Europe, Jews were often money lenders because they weren't allowed to work any other job. So they lend money, they have a tavern, and they lend money. They were money lenders. And then what happened periodically when the debts became too big? The money didn't get paid back. There was no bitachon. What happened? There was a pogrom. Yeah. There was a pogrom, and the first thing they did, what's the first thing they did whenever there was a pogrom? They got to the records and burnt the records of the interests. That was the first thing. First they killed the Jews and burnt the records. So by a non-Jew, certainly with anti-Semites, it was anything but a sure thing you're going to get your money back. Therefore, your bitachon wasn't affected by the non-Jews. You lend the non-Jews, then you daven to Hashem, please, Rebbeinu Shalom, hopefully I get my money back and not get killed. As opposed to lending to the Jews where you know that they're going to pay back. And therefore, the commentaries say in both directions, it's not acceptable. That's what the Mefarshim say. Okay, now take a look at, I don't know if we'll have time for all this. Take a look at Pasuk Lamed. Perek Chav Beis Pasuk Lamed. It's on the same page, 432. Matt, you had a question.
If you're trying to get something, I could say that.
No, go ahead.
Doesn't that bring up like a modern day issue? Like, can a Jew can't start a banking business in America, right? Because you don't know who's going.
If you lend to a Jew, it's a good question. There's something called a Heteriska. In other words, you're able to lend with interest, and this is not a. It's a legitimate halachic. It's not like whitewashing. It's a legitimate halachic loophole. There's a difference between whitewashing and a loophole. A loophole means that you're doing everything by the letter of the law. Whitewashing means you're doing something underhanded. There's a legitimate halachic way for people to borrow money and pay with interest because it's not really interest. It gets a little complicated. It turns the lender into there's got to be some element of risk for the lender. All banks in Israel, when you walk into the bank, you'll see, just like when you see in the store, you see a hechsher on the wall, right? The Badatz or Reuben or whatever the hechsher that you see on a restaurant. In a bank, you will see on the wall a Heteriska. It's called a Heteriska. That way the bank could lend and collect with interest based on this Heteriska because you're dealing with Jews. That's why, ironically, a lot of things get trickier because you're in Israel dealing with Jews. Banks in America, if the bank is owned by non-Jews, or for example, a shop after Pesach, selling the chametz. You know, you had a Jewish store in Israel. Every Jewish grocery store has to sell their chametz for Pesach. In America, if you have a store, whatever the Kroger's or whatever these places are, if it's owned by non-Jews, then it's not an issue. Hospitals for Kohanim are much less severe in America because the majority is not Jews. The majority of the deaths in the hospital are not Jews. So there are interesting things that become easier because you're around the non-Jews. But one of the things that becomes tricky is lending. I have a friend in Chicago who opened a bank. I have a guy who opened a bank. I assume that he either made a heter. I don't know how he did it. I would guess that there's a broad-based Heteriska, just like in Israel, that there's a Heteriska. There's a Heteriska that covers for anybody who needs to be covered by a Heteriska. Otherwise you can't do it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Rabbi, that today we have a lot of non-from Jews who run businesses. Like, how do we deal with that?
If they don't have a Heteriska, it becomes a problem. A problem. They have the banks in Israel, because they do deal with from Jews and they want to make money, and so they have Heteriska. Not all poskim hold by it, by the way. Not all poskim hold by the bank general. There are a lot of poskim do, but some of the big poskim don't. There are from guys who will not run overdraft in their banks. They're from guys who will not run overdraft in their bank because they contend that the Heteriska doesn't work. Once you run an overdraft, so then you're paying interest, and they hold it. You can't answer.
Is it lifning either if you're not necessarily the owner of the business, but I know a lot of Jews who work for cash advance.
It's a very complicated question. It's a good question about where you fit in on the chain of a company that's doing something that is against halacha. A lot of these places, a lot of these are very complicated. There are rabbanim who specialize in these sort of economic law because they could get so complicated. Rabbi Bradowitz is one of them. That again, he specializes in all law, but this is one of his areas of expertise and there's serious questions about where you fit in on the chain. There are questions of investment. If you invest in the stock market, are you allowed to invest, let's say, in McDonald's, where they're selling non-kosher food, and certainly some of the people buying it are Jewish? Are you allowed to? These are serious questions that come up in halacha. Serious questions. Okay, take a look at the bottom of the page. So it says. Not the bottom of the page, sorry, Pasuk Lamed. Ve'anshe kodesh tiuli, you should be people, holy people. See that? 6 lines on the bottom. Ubasar basada trefa lo sochelu. You must not eat the non-kosher meat which has been killed. Basar basada trefa, an animal that's, let's say, been killed by another animal. What do you do with that meat? La kelev tashlichun, also you give it to the dogs. And here, Chazal say the dogs were given the meat that became a treifa goes to the dogs. Why? What did the dogs do to earn this gift? Anybody remember?
They didn't bark when the Jews left.
Correct. When the Jews left Egypt, the dogs did not bark. La kelev tashlichu, and also you give it to the dogs because it says l'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yecheratz kelev l'shano. No dogs barked or wagged their tongues at Jews when they left Egypt. Which begs what question?
They don't have free will.
Correct. Why should dogs be rewarded for not having free will? Dogs do not have free will. And the question of animals animals do not have free will. Animals don't talk. Animals communicate. Animals do not have free will. So a guy once asked me a question here. There was a story, some guy fell into the ocean. Some guy fell off a boat or whatever it was. He fell into the ocean somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. Somewhere off the coast of Mexico, in the Gulf of Mexico, which apparently is shark-infested water. What do you call it? Not skiing, surfing. Surfboarding apparently is best, ironically, in the water waves. The type of water that you get for surfers seems to be best in shark water, where there are sharks, like off the coast of Australia and these sort of places, which is why I have never done it. Among other things, I definitely chess is safer. So this guy apparently fell into the water off the coast of Mexico, and surrounded by shark-infested waters, and he was surrounded by a school of dolphins. And dolphins fight sharks. The dolphins, according to his account, the dolphins surrounded him, and as the dolphin Hatzalah committee, they surrounded him and escorted him through the sharks to dry land. That's what. So the guy asked me, do those dolphins get rewarded? Do the dolphins get rewarded for having saved this guy's life? And the answer is obviously what?
No.
Why?
They don't have free will?
There's no free will. What the dolphins aren't doing it as a chesed. The dolphins are doing what dolphins have an instinct to do. Dolphins have an instinct to fight sharks. You know that? The dolphins fight sharks? And one of the ways they fight sharks is they will torpedo themselves at the shark's gills until they smash his gills over and over until the shark can't breathe, which is a fascinating thing. And my brother, who was going to be an oceanographer, and today he's a Bucky in Shas, he's a Rebbe in another yeshiva. My brother was going to be an oceanographer. He once told me that when dolphins sense that there is a shark in the vicinity hiding, they'll actually send out one dolphin as a decoy. And the shark will come out, and then they all gang up on the shark. Right? Which is absolutely fascinating. I had one kasha on that. I only had one difficulty was, how do they select which one's going to be the decoy? I always wondered about that. Okay, Melvin, you're up. What? Hell, let Stanley do it. I did it last week. My tail still hasn't grown back yet. Let him do it. I don't know how they do these things. At the end of the day, there's no bechira. There's no free choice. There's no reward. So why does the Torah reward the dogs? The dogs also did not choose not to bark at the Jewish people. The answer is that the Torah is teaching us what reward is. If even dogs who don't have bechira are going to be rewarded that meat is thrown to the dogs, then a human being should know what lays in store for a human being when a human being exercises the bechira properly to do a mitzvah. And when you have bechira, it's obviously more challenging. That's one of the reasons the Gemara says, Gadol, who gets greater reward? Look at that question. Who gets greater reward in Torah? Somebody who has an obligation to do a mitzvah, or somebody who volunteers to do the mitzvah?
Obligation.
Right?
Obligation.
Obligation? Are you sure? Obligation, you don't have a choice. Volunteer. You sure? So the Gemara says that Rav Yosef was blind. And Rav Yosef heard that he said, I get tremendous reward because I'm blind, and I'm not anybody who could show that somebody who is not obligated gets reward. I'll make a banquet for him. I'll make a celebration. And then he heard the Chazal and Kedusha teach, Godol ha-mitzuvah ve'osa, mimi she'eno mitzuvah ve'osa. Somebody who's got an obligation has greater reward than somebody who doesn't have an obligation. Then Rabbi Yosef says, if somebody could teach me that, I'll make a celebration if you could do it. Why? What was your Rabbi Yosef? What was his issue? Why is it that Godol ha-mitzuvah ve'osa, why are you get greater reward? So the answer is, number one, when you have an obligation, Toso says, you're nervous about messing up. If you're a volunteer, well, okay, I could take it or leave it. When you have an obligation that it's on your head that I got to do that makes it more difficult, number one. Number two, it's psychological. Number two, when you're told to do something, once you're told to do it, that changes everything. So the classic example is the husband who goes to do the dishes on a Motzei Shabbos. And you're going to volunteer without your wife asking you. You go over to the sink, roll up your sleeves, and you're ready to hit the dishes. Those crusty chunk pots. And you're going to scrub them out. All right, we're into science fiction here. But you're going to do it, right? You're walking over to go to do it. And then you hear wait till you're married, guys. Then you hear your wife's voice from the back room. She says, "Hi, Em, do you mind doing the dishes?" At that point, just let the steam out of it. Why? Because up until now, I was a volunteer. I'm a national hero. It's fun, right? Once she says to do it, you have to do it. Oh, all of a sudden, that's not so much fun anymore. That takes the wind out of your sails. Psychologically, nobody likes to be told what to do. You have to shake a lulav and an esrog. All right. Then the women come in to shake the lulav and esrog. They don't have the chiyuv to volunteer. It's a time-bound mitzvah. They're not obligated. And the women take the lulav and esrog and they give a good shake, right? And break the tip, right? And they're very creative. It's interesting because their sense of direction is not, men, like that. And the women, it's kind of like, you just stay far away when they're doing it because you get greater reward. You get greater reward because you're obligated. By the way, I'm not making that up. They've done tests on what's called spatial skills. SPATIAL, spatial skills. The classic example, what I've understood, the classic example is map reading, and stereotypically, who's better at reading maps? Men, far better. They've done these spatial skill tests. Men obliterate the women across the board, but they've also done tests. This is where they take a person who's experiencing an intense emotion. Listen to this. This is remarkable. Somebody's experiencing an intense emotion, and they distort the image. And they give it to men and women to say, what's happening over here? And the women obliterate the men across the board. Man takes a look and says, oh, wow, he's laughing. One says, oh, is he upset? Right? So, and it turns out that it's a picture of a guy who just dropped a bowling ball on his own foot. Something like that. And the men think, oh, he looks so happy. Oh, he looks happy. And the women obliterate the men across the board. And what's remarkable is, on these distorted images, and on the spatial skills, the men are far superior. So when it comes to directions of waving a lulav, you can understand why a woman might have might be a little difficult for her. The classic, all the shows you've seen on TV a million times where the wife is trying to read the map, right? She's trying to read the map, and the husband takes it from her hand like he just does. You've seen it a million times, right? Because it's a different way the brain works. When it comes to the spatial skills, you know what's remarkable? The Gemara says the Gemara says this. A woman has a greater insight to guests than men do. She has much better insight into the guests than the men have. Mm-hmm. Right, so you have a guest at your house, and the husband says, wow, he was a great guy. Guy leaves the house, why is he a great guy? And the wife says, count the silverware. Because she sees something that he doesn't see. She's got a greater insight. You see, this all bears out. Chazal knew this already a couple thousand years ago. It's all there. So the Torah is telling you over here, you throw the meat to the dog. Look at the very next pasuk. Lo sisa shema shav. Now literally, do not accept a false report. And Chazal darshan this to refer to, look at Rashi. Lo sisa shema shav. Where is it? Left column, 6 lines from the top. 7 lines from the top. Lo sig kitargumo. Lo sekabel shmo dishkar, that's what the Targum says. Azhora lemekabel loshen hara. You're not allowed to accept Lashon Hara. And the Gemara says, why is it these two psukim juxtaposed next to each other? The one that says, throw them to the dog, throw the meat to the dogs, and the other one says, don't accept Lashon Hara. Says the Gemara, a person who listens, who speaks Lashon Hara, is fitting to throw him to the dogs. A person who speaks Lashon Hara is fitting to them. There are other comparisons between a Baal Lashon Hara and a dog. Right? The Baal, somebody who speaks Lashon Hara is compared to a rabid dog. Because a rabid dog walks along the side of the roads, he drools, his ears are drooping down. He's got all sorts of characteristics, like a guy who's the gossip monger, who walks along, kind of from the outside of the conversation, as his ears are drooping down. That means he's kind of pretending he doesn't hear, and he can't wait to go and shovel it off somewhere else. And therefore, the Torah says the guy speaks, that's the connection between the guy speaks Lashon Hara, fitting to throw a guy to the dogs, as the Gemara says. All right, now there's another issue here. We'll have to wait for next time, but we'll have to continue with this whenever next time is. Well, no, but what do you call it? Sunday is not a problem. Right now, now they're changing I just saw that they're saying the snow was supposed to be at 5 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon. Now they're talking about 12 at night. So it looks like